Listen to the eagle.
I want to go back to Jim just a minute from what I heard in that 3-hour hearing. Main concern, disease. Ethical came into play.
Right.
What else besides those two issues?
Well, one thing we haven't even thought about, I think, is the whole issue of enclosures in and among themselves. Anytime you put up an enclosure, it prevents native wildlife from being able to move from one spot to another. I mean, that's just fact. You can lay it out any way you want to. One of the things that's happening here in Mississippi, some people with private land are actually getting fenced in. People around them are fencing them in. So deer can't move back and forth.
Well,
you know,
fencing them out too.
Yeah, absolutely. And what happens when somebody puts a fence up, I know because I've worked with a lot of landowners, the first thing they say is, I say, why do you want to put a fence up? Well, my neighbor's killing my deer. I said, well, wait a minute. They're not your deer. You're probably killing your neighbor's deer too. They're not your deer. They're a public trust wildlife resource.
But it's legal.
Well, that's my next point. But and I don't mean to sound like I'm against you, because I agree with you. But on the flip side, this bill has nothing to do. That's already happening, and it's legal in this state. We're not changing that.
The bill basically would allow import and export of white-tailed deer, which is illegal by the Lacey Act.
No, that's correct.
Should never happened. Aside from that, you know, let's just think about the ethics of this a little bit. You know, how do you guarantee someone that they can kill a 200-plus buck? There's got to be 2 or 3 ways. One, you've got to put them in a small enough pen that they can't escape. 2, you've got to drug them so that they can't escape. Or 3, you've got to have them so habituated to human behavior that they'll come up and take a cookie out of your hand and they're not afraid of wildlife. Or all of the above.
Well, let me address some of what he says, because some of that's just factually not correct. 33 states in the United States now have deer farming as a valid growing industry in their states. None of those states are violating the Lacey Act, which is a federal act.
If they import and export white-tailed
all
deer,
33
they're
of those
violating the
states
Lacey Act.
import and export deer.
If they're violating the Lacey Act for importing and exporting white-tailed deer.
Well, then how can you break the law then?
That must not be the case, because it's going on. The federal people don't know anything about it. So, but let me address one of the things you said, because I can't let that stand. You said that the only way you could hunt these deer was to drug them or guarantee to hunt them. There's no such thing as a guaranteed hunt in one of these preserves.
What do you see advertised? 100% guarantee.
No,
100% guarantee.
You don't see me advertise that for sure.
Yep.
These deer are turned loose into a fair chase preserve, and there are no drugging. There's no any of the things you said takes place on these deer. I have a hunting preserve. I turn my deer loose in an 1,100-acre preserve. I may not kill him. I may not even see him for the whole year. He may die of old age. He may shed his antlers. I've never seen him. But it's free chase. You could come hunt there and not see him. I don't guarantee you can kill anything when you come to my preserve.
I don't doubt you do that. I'll take your word for that. But there's a lot of deer farming operations that do not do that. There's evidence of them on video. I can show you where Jimmy Houston shot one in Indiana in a 2-acre pen. They ran the deer into the 2-acre pen, and him standing on a bow stand looking down at a pile of corn.
He brought up the idea of public safety.
Yeah.
Take my preserve, for example. It's 1,100 acres. I have no more than 2 people hunting on that preserve at one time. So roughly 1 hunter per 550 acres. Now, I challenge you to go in any of the refuges in the state of Mississippi on opening day of deer season and find a spot that you can hunt where there's less than 1 hunter every 550 acres. It's just more populated. So the risk of an accident in a preserve is a lot less than it is on a refuge or in the public land.
Got a question for you, twofold, or for 2 reasons. One, I may be interested in. 2, just because I want to know how much to hunt at your enclosure.
All the enclosures base their hunts on the quality of the animal or the score of the animal. And so it varies from shooting a 130, 40-inch deer up to shooting a 300-inch deer.
So it's basically on what you take.
It's basically on what you harvest.
For television audience, how much of them deer is right, John? Would you say? What is that considered right there?
That deer scores.
Don't say what you think it is. You can't say that on radio.
Pornography.
That particular deer scored 318 inches. I raised him on my farm in Louisiana. And for a guy to harvest a deer like that would be, $40,000-$50,000.
What do y'all feed those deer to get them to be that
And
big?
hey, let me try to describe this to our radio. Paul Lott couldn't even pick up one antler.
Oh, it looks like a 50. What's that song? 32-point buck. What do y'all feed them something to make them bigger?
Well,
and we talked about steroids. You said you don't use steroids.
No, you use no steroids. It's all in the quality of the feed, being sure that these deer are analyzed, they're taken care of. We check them every morning, every afternoon. We give them vitamins. We give them vaccines.
Can I eat the meat from that deer?
Certainly, you can eat the meat.
Okay, but we had a question come up about that, though.
Yeah, 30 Yeah, Tom Lester, F from Green Acres, told us a story about a friend of his that went up north, and they had to disclose to him, you will probably kill a 10-point or better, but we're taking no liability. You cannot eat the meat.
We never did find out why.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know the circumstances there. I can just tell you that all of our hunting preserves, we harvest the deer, and the meat goes home with the individual that killed the deer.
We got Manny on the line in Biloxi.
Hey, Manny.
Down on the coast. Hey, Manny.
Hey, Mr. Paul.
Good to have you down there.
I just can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Good to have you on the Gulf Coast, Manny. What can we do for you?
Well, Mr. Paul, this bill that they got in Jackson originated right here in Biloxi.
Really?
Yes, sir. Mr. Tommy Snell, y'all said a few weeks ago that this was the man who inspired this thing.
That's right.
And I'm sure he's put a lot of research into this thing before he ever brought it before the committees, and that he is all for the betterment of Mississippi and trying to get people to work and put more money into Mississippi, just like he did on this casino business, which is a pretty good drop of money in the state of Mississippi. Now, they talk about farming these deer. I was thinking as y'all was talking, these dairy farmers that we got, which we ain't got no more, there's hundreds of dairy farms all over the state of Mississippi. And if anybody can raise a cow and get this milk out of these cows and keep these cows healthy, I'm sure that the dairy farmers would be the perfect farm to raise these deer on, because most of them are small acreage farms, and it would put these guys back in business again.
It's a good point, Manny. I mean, again, it's an issue of, like what you said, money, jobs, economic development. Mr. Jim is calling the bluff on that.
Absolutely.
But, Jim, it's politics.
Sure, it's
We've
politics.
mentioned that today.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people running for office that are going to skirt this or they're going to jump on it. And don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
I'd like to say one other thing, Mr. Paul. You talk about unethical hunting. Now, the most unethical hunting that I know of is these guys out there standing on the side of the road running these deer to death with these dogs and chasing them all day and all night long, and to me, that is unethical.
Manny, thank you for your call. You talking about another hot subject that I've already been in the middle of them two, and I don't want to ever do that.
We're going to get
again.
on that one later, Manny. Keep a listing late to next week.
I will say this, but both sides of this is a lot calmer than the deer hunter, the steel hunters, and the dog hunters.
With the dog hunters bring their dogs in here.
Oh, man, it's rough.